My pleasure to introduce Cindy Booth, Esquire. Cindy is the CEO of Child Advocates, which is an organization that started in 1982 and has represented thousands of children who are in the child welfare system in Marion County. She actually started her work life as a teacher in Warren Township, right? Is that so? She's got a pretty close personal connection to Warren Township. After being a teacher, she went to law school and started at Child Advocates in '94 as a part-time attorney. And she became a full-time attorney in '95 and the executive director in 1996. At the time, they had 8 employees, and they have grown all the way to have 90 employees, and they are no doubt impacting and touching thousands and thousands of lives across our city and right here in Warren Township. So very excited to hear about the good work they're doing, especially in the midst of this pandemic. I will turn it over to Cindy.
Thank you very much, Janine. I really appreciate you all inviting me to speak about my professional love, Child Advocates. It's true, I graduated from law school in, oh gosh, '91, and I turned to my husband and said, I'm not sure I want to practice law, and he was thrilled to hear about that. But I had heard about an organization when I was out of juvenile court that represented the best interest of children, and had not ever heard one word about it in law school. And once I heard about it, the mission of giving a voice to every child who's in the child welfare system, I thought, this is something for me. This is meaningful to me, and I want to continue to help children in a different way, different from when I was a teacher. Our mission is to represent the best interests of all the children in Marion County who are brought into the child welfare system. And so this started years ago in the late '70s with a judge who was hearing abuse and neglect cases. He's an attorney. The parents had attorneys, the child welfare agency had an attorney, and he said, I just want to know what's going on in this child's life right now. And I want to hear it from a member of our community. So he had a great idea in asking a group of community people to be trained to become CASAs. If you've ever heard of CASA, not the Spanish house, but CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocate. And it gradually worked its way across the country, and in the early '80s, it came to Indiana, and in true Hoosier fashion, every judge in every county was allowed to create, if they wanted to, a CASA program for their county, and we were created in 1982 with backing from the National Council of Jewish Women, and our first volunteers were from Junior League. One of the things that I try to impress upon people when I talk to groups like you all is that it's so important for the community to be involved in the child welfare system. Because one of the main things about the child welfare system is that it's closed off to the public. Our cases are confidential. And so if you hear about a child welfare case, it's probably because something has gone wrong and a child has suffered. And so you hear about it in a sensational way on TV. And one of the best ways to help children in the child welfare system is to either become a CASA or become a foster parent, because you're right there in the middle of helping the children directly. So when we started, we were very, very small, and I started as a part-time attorney, and then, as Janine said, I became director in 1996. And at the time, we represented only the children whose parents denied that their children are what we call child in need of services. Maybe you've heard of the acronym CHINS. So if the Department of Child Services, as the investigative arm of the county and the state, go in and they hear something about a child being abused or neglected, they have the authority to go in and figure out what's going on. Once that happens, then a representative from our agency is appointed to every child in the child welfare system in Marion County. So right now, you mentioned how the change is for what's going on right now. Everybody working from home makes it really difficult to report abuse and neglect when you think our top 3 reporters are law enforcement, medical personnel, and teachers. And so I remember, if you all remember Judge Payne, who was at juvenile court for years and years, I once asked him, what were the busiest times of juvenile court? And he said, now this is back in the traditional days, he said May, and he said October. And I thought, okay, October, is that because of Halloween? You know, I wasn't quite sure. And he said, no, in May, teachers are trying to get help for families before summer break. They're trying one last time. In October, they learned the children enough to know who's coming to school hungry, who's coming to school with lice, you know, all those kinds of things. And so right now we're in a really strange situation in which we are monitoring the children that we're supposed to monitor, and we're using the same tools that you and I are using right now, virtually, by phone, FaceTime, texting, you know, driving up into a child's driveway and having the caregiver, maybe it's grandma, calling us, and then we have a phone conversation, but the child's on the porch and we're in our car. It's been a very, very strange time. Juvenile court closed to only emergency hearings, so none of our hearings are really being heard regularly, and that's kind of a challenge for us as well. So basically what we do is once we are appointed and Department of Child Services has done its investigation, they call it an assessment now, but it's an investigation of whether or not there's abuse or neglect case that they need to move forward on. Then we were appointed to all the children that happens to, all the families, and we represent the best interest of the child. So the parents have court-appointed attorneys. The Department of Child Services has its case managers and its attorneys and service providers and foster parents and, you know, relative caregivers, and then we represent the best interest of the children. And every case, except in the most egregious cases, the assumption is we as a system are going to provide enough resources to put the family back together again so that they're safe and appropriate. In almost every case, that is the goal. So an underlying philosophy that we have at Child Advocates is we want children, if they cannot be in the home with their parents, we want them to be with biological family. So a lot of grandmothers are raising grandchildren, sisters and brothers sometimes come back and help little ones. So that's one of the main things that we want to do is to keep that connection with biological family. So the parents are given a roadmap at the very beginning of the case, and they are told to do services. They're offered services. These are all paid by taxpayer dollars, and sometimes parents disappear. Sometimes their mental health or their substance abuse addiction is so strong that they can't even do the services that they need to get their children back, or they may not even visit their children. In about half of our cases, the parents do receive their children back. And so the other half of the cases, we want, at Child Advocates, we want them to be adopted or in a guardianship with relatives, or if that's not possible, with perhaps a foster family or another family. But while that case is going on, and most of the cases are about a year to a year and a half long, as the parents are trying to find their way back to their children, we are representing them by going to see them wherever they are. We have volunteers. So CASA is a court-appointed special advocate who's from the community, who has that community lens. So the story I always tell when I was first with the agency, there were 3 little kids who were removed from their home because of really started with neglect, and then it turned out to be abuse as well, as they started to find out what happened in the case. So there were 2 little girls and a little boy, and the oldest little girl was told to babysit her younger siblings while Mama and Daddy Rick went to party. And they did that, but the neighbors saw them wandering around in their backyard doing all kinds of crazy, dangerous stuff. And so they called CPS, Child Protective Services, and they came out and investigated. When they talked to the children, the oldest child, who said at 8 years old, "I'm babysitting," she said, "Daddy Rick has been doing things to me." So we had sexual abuse there. We saw there were bruises on the little kids, and they were toddlers, in the shape of belt, marks and utility cords and that kind of thing. And then when they looked in the house, it was really, really dirty, and there was only a bottle of purple nail polish in the refrigerator. So very troubled, distressed family. When the children were moved, the older girl went to her father because he didn't know that was happening. So she left the case. But the 2 others, the smaller boy and the smaller girl, were separated. For some reason, the Department of Child Services case manager at the time placed them in different homes. So we weren't appointed to that case until it got time to find an adoptive home for this family, for these children. And the first thing our community volunteer did, she walked in with all the professionals with all their ideas about what should happen to these children. And you know what she asked? Why aren't these children placed together in the same home? Because they needed to be a family together. They needed to keep contact with siblings. And so I think it was one of my first cases that I ever did as an attorney for the agency. Probably didn't know what I was doing, but I went in and said, we're going to fight this because our community volunteer wanted to do that. And so we did, and we won. And those two children ended up being adopted together. So they were able to keep that family connection. That's what should have happened. And there was no reason for that little girl to be in so many foster homes as she went through her childhood when the case was going on. So it's that kind of what is in the best interest of these children. And I think it really helps to have that community lens, not only for the child, like coming in and saying, why isn't this happening for this child, but also for our system to hold everybody accountable. And I think it's also a really good thing for people in the community to do. So we're always looking for volunteers to help us do what we do. We have thousands of children on any one day in Marion County. And I'm sorry, I was going to get the Warren Township zip code, 46107, 46163, 46203, and 46218, and tell you how many children you actually have in the child welfare system. And I will call it operator error. I could not get our data system to work, and I will try to get that for you if you're interested in seeing it. But overall, on any one day in Marion County, we'll have over 3,500 children in the child welfare system, either in relative care or foster care or in placements, not so much in residential placements, on any one day. So we'll represent thousands of children over the course of a year. What is concerning to me right now is without school going on, and many people not even able to or feeling comfortable to do regular medical reports, our number of new cases has gone down. And I don't think it's because abuse and neglect is not happening. I think it's just it's not being reported, and children are, kind of not, I would say, sequestered. They're all, they're all staying home as well as we are. So what I expect when school starts is that we'll see a big jump in cases. That's what I think. And then in terms of economically, the last time when we had our recession in 2008, the result of that was a 25% increase in the number of children coming into the system. So the demographics of the children that we represent are disproportionately African American. There are a lot of institutionalized racism kind of reasons for that. But we have 42% of children are African American in the child welfare system in Marion County. 47, and that's disproportionate percentage as to their population, as to their representation in our population. 47% of the children are white. We only have about 2% Hispanic, and then we have a category that recently came in about 5 or 6 years ago called multiracial, which honestly is a mess. If anybody looks at demographics ever, there's some Hispanic children in there. There's some African American, one child, one parent is African American, another is white or Hispanic or whatever. So that one I sort of put as an 11% of what is that category. I'd like to go name by name to really see what that category is. And so we represent all of those children, and we look for volunteers all of the time because it helps to have a community volunteer be able to go out and visit the children more often than what our staff can. So we now have 40 social workers who go out and visit children, and they each have, we hope, from 15 to 20 community volunteers who help them go out and see the children. Of course, right now they're Zooming or whatever virtual tool we're using right now. We also have a couple of really important programs. Everything that we do is related to the well-being of children. And so we noticed that children who are in foster care often have worse educational outcomes. I don't know if anybody's a teacher in your group, but we really noticed that once children are in the system, if they move, and sometimes they do move placements, they lose 4 months of schooling each time they move. So if you can imagine, I moved from the temporary foster home to the permanent foster, to another foster home or to a grandma and then moved again, you're losing a lot of time in school each time that happens. And so we had a wonderful anonymous donor who gave us some money for what we called an educational liaison. And so we have our people who, the guardians ad litem, or the staff social workers, and the CASAs from the community representing the general best interest of the children, their care, their custody, their counseling, anything that we can do to keep them safe. And then we have the educational liaisons who are added on top of that. And so one of the things they do is help children, some of the zero tolerance policies. If a child has suffered trauma, then that may come out in their behavior in school. And so we've been able to adjust punishment and disciplined accordingly. We've been able to help children graduate. We've had a couple of kids who've never been in school. One boy in particular, I remember, was 11 years old. He'd never been in school. And the reason he'd never been in school was because his mother had a terrible experience in school. She was mentally ill. And so she sort of projected all that onto him. And so he was terrified about going to school. What our educational liaison was able to do was create a plan for him so that the first day he walked down the hallway in school and saw people in school and classes. The next day he stays a little longer and so on. And by the end of the year, when we had represented him, he was able to maintain in class for the whole day, which is amazing. So that's a really important program that we often use retired teachers and retired administrators to help us do that program by volunteering. And we have some retired administrators and teachers who are in that program. The other thing that we do, because of the disproportionate percentage of African American children in the child welfare system nationally, and certainly is represented, as I indicated earlier, in Marion County, is we have a program that was first called Undoing Racism. We now call it Interrupting Racism for Children. Warren Township Schools have really worked hard to be a part of that, and it's a 2-day workshop, and we look at reasons for the way children are in the child welfare system at a disproportionate percentage, and also the institutionalized racism policies and practices that create that, including history. So that's a really important piece of our culture here in Indianapolis. And so we do that because we know that's important for our children in the way we represent them. So we're also a not-for-profit, and at this point I'd probably share with you all the wonderful events that we were going to do this year, but they've all been canceled or become virtual. So we, at the beginning of the year, usually in April, we'll do an evening with child advocates, which is not a fundraiser, it is a friend-raiser. And we do a poetry and art contest for all the children that we represent, and they get to win cash prizes. And that's a really fun, upbeat event for all of our children who participate to be there. That didn't happen this year. Then we did a superhero run where you could dress up as your favorite superhero, whatever, no judgment on whatever superhero you want to be. And it's a typical walk run, and you'll see many of those kinds of events are canceled. We're going to do a fundraising luncheon, but we've decided to do a virtual trivia night instead. So if you're interested in trivia, you can participate virtually. And then we usually do a back to school event because we'll work on corporations and other entities giving us school supplies and backpacks so that we invite all of our children to a big fair that we have in the parking lot of DCS. And so we'll have, a little train that goes around, and we have face painting and all kinds of street fair kinds of things. And then mainly we give away school supplies and backpacks, inviting all of our children who have been in the system or anyone else who needs a backpack. I think this year that's going to be a drive-through, which is really strange. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't got my mind around it, how we're going to do that. But that'll be on July 12th. And we're always looking for people who might want to do just a one-day help. Maybe you don't think you could be a CASA volunteer, but you could, help children get school supplies for that one day. So that'll be July 12th. And then if any of you have any questions about the child welfare system or anything I've said, please let me know. I'm happy to take questions. Excuse me,
I just have a comment, Cindy.
Yeah.
I just want to say on the behalf of Marion County Prosecutor's Office and me personally, I appreciate, I'm pretty sure our office appreciates all you do for our children. And I think it's amazing what you and your agencies do. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank
you bring up a point, our cases are, I forgot to say, our cases are civil in nature. So there might be a criminal act that started something like the sexual abuse of a child or something. And that the prosecutors would then take care of that with their process. And then we take care of the care and custody of the children outside of that criminal action. So thank you. I appreciate it.
That's amazing. Amazing work.
Cindy, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm back on then. I was in a muted status. But no, I was just interested in how you plan to to make those resources available. And given that we don't know what's going to be happening with the school system between now and then, the beginning of the school year, are those resources that you got, how are you going to get those out? And does that situation that we're going to experience threaten that ability to provide those resources?
And by resources, you mean the school supplies and backpacks?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think we're going to go ahead. Our educational liaisons check in with the townships and IPS to make sure that our timeline is good. We usually do it a couple weeks after, and we're working with DCS and some other service providers. We'll do the same kind of media coverage of it. And as I say, once we get the supplies here, we already have a couple corporations who have given us very nice grants. If you've all heard of Lessonly, have you heard of Lessonly? They do trainings virtually and webinars and that kind of thing. They give us $10,000. That could buy a lot of school supplies. And so our plan is to go ahead and purchase everything. And my goal every time we do something like this is to not go home with anything. So we will go ahead and have that on July 12th. And we'll put it out in the media and everything. And I think the way we're going to do it is package it up, and then people will drive through and tell us what age group or something like that, and then they'll get it. If we have anything left over, we usually give them to, is it Teachers Treasures? Teachers Treasures, that wonderful organization, yes. Or we'll deliver it right to the schools. But the idea is to give it all out. We don't want to keep anything.
Do you how do you say, collaborate with food pantries and that kind of thing to make sure folks during the summer are able to get, foods and things of that nature?
So our educational liaisons represented 20% of our children, and then our staff social workers and probably some of our volunteers become very well versed in what resources we have in our community and trying to connect families to them. So let's say we have a grandmother who's taken on 5 of her grandchildren. I don't know very many people who could do that without saying, I need help, right? I all of a sudden I have 5 of their mouths to feed. So they all know those kinds of resources. In terms of actually having food or being a food pantry, we're not trying to connect everybody to those resources.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, thank you.
Cindy, you had mentioned a 2-day workshop, the Interrupting Racism for Children workshop, and working closely with schools. Can you talk through that with me a little more? Like, is that a workshop that you put on for the community where a school could host, or what does that look like?
Thank you. And so it started out with our work in looking at the disproportionate percentage of African-American children in the system. And we found a group, People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. They did a workshop, 2-day workshop called Undoing Racism. And it basically talks about the history of our country, policies that have been created, stereotypes, things like that. And we go through 2 days of exploring those kinds of things. We then created our own that has children as its focus. And so a lot of school districts have really embraced it. Warren Township has. James Taylor, is it James Taylor? Okay, I knew it was a famous singer's name. I just wanted to make sure I got the right name. He's really been supportive of it. And so what happened is we do have a sliding fee scale and sometimes even have community come for free. It is a 2-day workshop, require everyone to be there for the full 2 days. And it is an amazing, amazing workshop in terms of, it's not a gotcha kind of thing, but it is a very much exploring what you know about your own community and what you think, and then what you will then change in your work as you go forward. And so it's been very, very effective. We've trained thousands of people in it already. And so again, because of this pandemic, we are trying to figure out how to do a circle of 30 to 40 people without it with distancing. So I convinced our landlord to let us use an empty suite. So we're going to go forward with the workshops, I think, starting in July or August. But if you are interested or you know of anybody who would like to attend, first email me, and my email is cindy@childadvocates.net, cindy@childadvocates.net, or our director of that program is a woman named Jill English, and she will be happy to get you in one of the workshops. And it could be, I think we've even got one scheduled in Warren. I'm sorry, I didn't think about checking that, but I know we've done a lot of work with Warren Township. Oh, you're on mute, Janine.
I will definitely follow up and make sure that I have those dates and that see how I can share that out so that people are aware and as many people as can benefit from that have the opportunity to do so. And thank you for doing that. I did have one other question in terms of being a CASA. That's just something that's been on my heart for a long time. It's something that I want to do. Can you tell me a little bit more about just the time commitment for that type of role?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably should have done that. I think I got distracted. I can see a squirrel jumping up my big tree outside. Got distracted. Squirrel. So being a CASA is a really important part of our child welfare system. We are certified by the Indiana Supreme Court, and so they require us in our certification to provide 30 hours of training. The way we do that is 15 class hours and then 15 other hours. And so right now, during this time, we are doing virtual info sessions. So if you go on our website, you would probably be able to see the next date for our virtual info session, which would be a Zoom meeting.
Okay.
And we just graduated the first class that did everything by Zoom. They did the info session, the training, and now they're visiting children by Zoom. So it's very interesting. Definitely be measuring how all that works out at the end. But the classes, I think the next class is in June, but it'll be there on the website. Sorry, I don't have all that. But Chris Bundy is our director of our volunteer program, and he's wonderful. And so we go through different topics like what is the child welfare legal system like, and how do you talk to a child? And what are some of the service providers, and what is trauma and how does it affect children, and what is cultural competency and why is that important if you're going into someone's house visiting and asking how the children are. And there's an observation at court, although right now that's not going to happen because the court's not really operating at full strength, and different things like that. Our volunteers the tools to be able to visit with children and get information, because the idea is to gather information on a snapshot on how that child is doing right now so that we can report to the court without really looking at, thinking, okay, what is mom doing here? What is dad doing there? This is what's happening to the child right now, and that's our focus. So we are looking for volunteers. The pandemic has not stopped us. We're doing everything virtually, so.
Great.
Any other questions I might answer?
Cindy, not a question, but a comment. I want to thank you for everything that you're doing to help give children in those situations of growing up. I knew a lot of kids who were in similar scenarios, and I just appreciate that there are people like you out there that are trying to intervene and do what's in the interest of the kid.
Thank you. We have a great staff, very committed to children, as many people in the community are, and we have really good volunteers. When you think about it, people willing to go out and see children, and that might be a 5-hour commitment in a month, depending on the number of children. But it's amazing how our community responds, and I'm really glad to be a part of it.
Cindy, I did have another question that just came to mind. And that is, I remember you said that you work closely with the Juvenile Detention Center and the courts in that regard. I'm just thinking, how do you assist some of these kids that get sent there? What type of monitoring do you guys do, if you do any, on trying to move them from that environment? I mean, I know that environment is in many occasions are just there to hold them over until they can talk to a judge. But in some cases, I would imagine that some of these kids need some assistance in getting their lives back together once they get through that system. How, do you track any of that, or do you what actions do you take in that regard?
Yes, so we represent all the children on the CHIN side, the Child in Need of Services, and if a child also has a delinquency, then we represent that child. So an interesting thing happens. So the children who come in as solely delinquent on, delinquency charges, they're over here. The children who are CHINs and then have a delinquency, they get the support of our agency and all the resources of Department of Child Services. So it's pretty uneven. In some ways, I think that works because we're there to assist their whole family.
Yeah.
So we work with the delinquency system if our children are involved in delinquent behavior. What I've found is that our educational liaisons are amazing in helping children get behavior that occurs at school and that may get them in trouble at school. That attention with someone really looking to help. How can we accommodate, you to get you where you need to be in your schooling? That's really been very, very helpful. However, I have heard, Mr. Dorsey, and this is really important, the court is looking to change that sort of, the delinquents are over here, to have a system where there are people, instead of a probation officer waiting to violate a child, to have that sort of wraparound service happen on the delinquent side as well. Of it. And I think they're doing a project with Georgetown University, and I think it will be very, very helpful, very helpful. And I'm not talking about the children and youth who are a risk to themselves and others at a very high level. I'm talking about children who are at the beginning stages, and we don't want to keep them going into the pipeline, right? And so I think that's a big development that I support completely.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, one more thing. Healthcare. You guys monitor the healthcare of these kids when they get, assigned to a foster home. How do you do that?
We have categories of questions that our volunteers and staff ask about physical needs, medical needs, emotional needs, psychological needs, educational needs. I might be forgetting one. And so one of the first things we check, because like the child who'd never been to school at age 11, some of the children who come into care are there because their parents are severely addicted to substances, or they're mentally ill. And so they may never have even had any of the vaccination, any medical care. So that's one of the first things that we do, that we make sure that their medical needs are met. We work very closely with Riley Hospital in a program called Bridges, and I can't remember the rest of it, Bridges, where we work to make sure that the 0 to 3 children are really met, all their needs are being met in the right way with Riley.
Good, thank you.
And Cynthia, nice softball for me, Howard, but I work for the Jane Pauley Community Health Center, and there's 5 community health centers like the Jane Pauley Community Health Center in Indianapolis, and so any of the 5 would be open as a health center to take on these children too, and provide them their care, especially if they're under foster care. They're probably on Medicaid, and we accept all those for that. As you know, we do primary care, behavioral health care, and dental, so I'm sure we already service that, but we can get you numbers if necessary. So. Yeah,
that's great. Dental is one too, children who just have a mouthful of cavities, at age 4. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Any other questions for me? I say one last thing. You yourself may not be ready to volunteer or think you have enough time. I will say that 80% of our volunteers have full-time jobs, and have staff workers that are assigned to help volunteers with the cases that they choose, that we assign them to. But if you can't do it, please, please spread the word, to your family, to your friends, to your neighbors. We'd love to see many more volunteers come and help children in the child welfare system. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy, for being our speaker today. So.
Yes, thank you. Nice to be with you.
And Ryan, before we adjourn, I wanted to make sure the group knew, and I'll try to, with the holiday, I was a little late getting our reminder out, but we have the scholarship winners. It's going to be at our next meeting next Monday, so should be interesting to hear from all these scholarship winners. We can hear their story and hear where they're going to be going to further their education and give them a chance to thank us for getting those scholarships. So it should be a really good meeting. So spread the word to the other Rotarians and visitors that might be a good one for people to attend so they can meet them, albeit virtually. So
it's next Tuesday, right? Mark?
That's correct. Yeah, next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel.
You said Monday, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah, I heard that too. But.
And Monday is the deadline for being able to get your donations doubled by the district. You get double the points at least anyway. So you put in 100, they give you 100 points matching, and that ends on Monday. So I need to have your money or your commitment. I think as Rotarians, we can trust that you follow up with your commitment. And we've got enough money in the account that I can do it anyway, so long as you don't say you're going to give us $5,000, So if you could do $100 and, but realize as well that sometime in the next week or two, you're going to be getting a bill from me for the January through June at $50 a quarter. So that's $100 plus your $8 a meal for the meals you ate before this coronavirus hit. So just keep that in mind because the donations are voluntary. So I just let everybody know that. So give me a call or something with the commitments.
Hey Don, you gave your home address to where to send that that commitment thing before the 30th. Can we just email you?
Well, if you're going to send money or cash, well, then or not cash, but check. If you're going to send a check, you have to mail it to me.
Oh, okay, all right. But you said committing, and so I figured some folks will probably be able to commit this week, but probably wouldn't be able to get the check to you unless say next Monday or something.
Well, yeah, if they'll commit and they can say that they'll do it, then I'll go on ahead and send it in. But the deadline is Monday, next Monday.
All right, I'll probably just walk it over.
Okay. Well, just let me know. So, but anyway.
Hey, one other thing, and that whoever can help me with this. How do you know where you stand on the foundation? I mean, how do you know where you are on the foundation?
Call member services at Rotary International.
Call member services. Okay, because I looked at that DAC B and I didn't find it. I thought it was on there somewhere, but okay.
Yeah, I can give you the number on it too as well. But
I'll double check this week, but I believe you can also look at it in Rotary.org. But let me verify that first.
Oh, okay, if you could, I'd just like to know where I stand.
Their telephone number is 866-976-8279, and I'll just type it in right here. Dude. Is this recorded or something so that we can see it?
It is, yes. Beginning with last week's meeting, our speakers will now be archived on the Indy East Rotary Club's own YouTube channel. So we will now be archiving our speakers as well as the end portion with questions and the closing of our meeting. With that, since we only have about 3.5 minutes left, a couple of quick pieces of club news. Last Thursday at our board meeting, we had a new proposed member, one of our visitors from last week, David Thompson. So our board has voted to approve his membership. Phil has sponsored him as a new member in our club, and we conducted his fireside chat yesterday. So he's looking forward to joining our club here in the coming weeks. Do we have any other club business or announcements before we close?
Just thanks, Cindy. Appreciate that. That was really good.
Thank you very much. I have to jump off for another Zoom call, and I was just writing something in the chat. So thank you all very much for your time and everything.
Yes, thanks, Cindy.
You're welcome.
Take care. Let me know if you have any questions.
And with that, we will close with our 4-way test. Number 1, Is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Number 2, is it
fair to all concerned?
Fair to all concerned.
Number 3, will it build goodwill?
Goodwill
And
and
better
better
friendship.
friendship.
And number 4, will it
be beneficial to all concerned?
All concerned.
So thank you, everybody. Have a safe and happy week. Don't forget to join us again next week with our scholarship winners joining us.
All right. Thanks.
Take
See
care.
you guys.
Bye, everyone. Have a good week.
You too. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a great week.